Dear students, in this session I am going to discuss the poem To the Food from Its Child, which is written by Pablo Neruda. The poem To the Food from Its Child is basically a criticism on how people force children to grow into society and forget all their dreams and imaginations. In other words, society crushes childhood dreams and forces people into rigid molds. Okay, now I will read out the poem. A child's foot does not know it's a foot yet, and it wants to be a butterfly or an apple. But then the rocks and the pieces of glass, the streets, the stairways, and the roads of hard earth keep teaching the foot that it cannot fly, that it can't be a round fruit on a branch. Then the child's foot was defeated, it fell in battle, it was a prisoner, condemned to live in a shoe. Little by little, without light, it got acquainted with the world in its own way, without knowing the other imprisoned foot, exploring like a blind man. Those smooth toenails of cords in a bunch got harder. They changed into an opaque substance, into hard horn, and the child's little petals were crushed, lost their balance, took the form of reptile without eyes, with the triangular heads like worms, and they had calloused over, they were covered with the faint volcanoes of death, coarsening hard to accept. But this blind thing kept going, without surrender, without stopping, hour after hour, one foot after another. Now was a man or a woman, above, below, through the fields, the mines, the stores, the government bureaus, backward, outside, inside, forward. This foot worked with its shoes. It hardly had time to be naked in love or in sleep. One foot walked, both feet walked, until the whole man stopped. And then it went down into the earth, and it did not know anything, because there everything was dark. It didn't know it was no longer a foot, or if they buried it, so it could fly, and so it could be an apple. Okay. Now I will read out the opening line once again. The child's foot does not know it's a foot yet, and it wants to be a butterfly or an apple. Here the child's foot does not know it's a foot, and it wants to be a butterfly or an apple. It is dreaming of becoming a butterfly or an apple. The first line of the poem suggests the child's ignorance of harsh realities of life. Ability to become butterfly and ability to become an apple are metaphors for the power of imagination and willingness to live meaningful life. Now I am coming to the next line. But then the rocks and pieces of glass, the streets and the stairways, and the roads of hard earth keep teaching the foot that it cannot fly. In these lines, we come to know that society is harsh, and it forces the kid to become responsible adult doing responsible things. Here foot realizes that it cannot live a meaningful, happy life which it wanted to live as the child grows up and faces the hardships of life, like walking on stones, beds of glasses, the ladders and paths in the rough earth. The foot realizes that it is merely a foot, and it cannot fly like a butterfly, nor it can be a bulging fruit on a branch. So here, beds of glass, stones, and paths in the rough earth suggest harsh realities of life. Then the child's foot was defeated, reading out the next line. Then the child's foot was defeated, it fell in battle, it was a prisoner, condemned to live in a shoe. The child's foot gets defeated in the battle, and it becomes prisoner, punished to live inside a shoe. The child's foot was defeated, it fell in battle, it was a prisoner, condemned to live in a shoe. In fact, fallen man has to face his struggles alone. Nobody comes to help him. Here the foot is fallen, and it is defeated. It is all alone. Here I would like to quote D.V. Gundappa's lines from his Mankuti Manakagga. Orvane niluve, ನೀನು ಉತ್ಕಟ ಕ್ಷಣಗಳಲ್ಲಿ, ಧರ್ಮ ಸಂಕಟಗಳಲ್ಲಿ, ಜೀವ ಸಮರದಲ್ಲಿ, ನಿರ್ವಾಣ ದೀಕ್ಷೆಯಲ್ಲಿ, ನಿರ್ಯಾಣಘಟ್ಟದಲ್ಲಿ, ನಿರ್ಮಿತ್ರನಿರಲು ಕಲಿ ಮಂಕುತಿಮ್ಮ. ಓರ್ವನೇ ನಿಲುವೆ ನೀನ್ ಉತ್ಕಟ ಕ್ಷಣಗಳಲ್ಲಿ, ಧರ್ಮ ಸಂಕಟಗಳಲ್ಲಿ, ಜೀವ ಸಮರದಲ್ಲಿ, ನಿರ್ವಾಣ ದೀಕ್ಷೆಯಲ್ಲಿ, ನಿರ್ಯಾಣಘಟ್ಟದಲ್ಲಿ, ನಿರ್ಮಿತ್ರನಿರಲು ಕಲಿ ಮಂಕುತಿಮ್ಮ. The child's foot is hurt and injured and it's all alone, toiling in the battle. It has nobody by its side. Here foot stands for the curbed imagination and shoe stands for the control of the society over child's imagination. Here the poet laments that human beings do not allow their children to have freedom so that they can do wonderful things and be happy. We all go on living like other people. We do not like to invent new ways of living, our own ways of living. We are all like frogs in a well, scared of change, struck with conventional thoughts. So, we are all prisoners, condemned or punished to live in a shoe. Now reading out the next line. Little by little, without light, it got acquainted with the world in its own way, without knowing the other imprisoned foot, exploring like a blind man. These lines mean that in the darkness of the shoe, it begins to understand the world in its own way. The foot is covered or enclosed in the darkness of the shoe, and it can only feel like a blind man. It is unable to see the other foot on a man's leg. The foot grows being completely out of touch with the fellow foot in the dark interiors of the shoe. Here, the poet beautifully portrays how a child which wanted to live colorful, meaningful, happy life turns out to be a mechanical blind man due to the society's control over its unparalleled imagination. Now I'm going to read out the next line. Those smooth toenails of cords in a bunch got harder. They changed into an opaque substance, into hard horn, and the child's little petals were crushed, lost their balance, took the form of reptile without eyes, with triangular heads like worms, and they had calloused over. They were covered with the faint volcanoes of death, a coarsening hard to accept. The soft nails of the baby foot grow harder and change themselves into opaque substance as hard as a horn. Here, opaque means not transparent. The tiny toes bunched out of trim. I'll read out the line again. Those smooth toenails of cords in a bunch got harder. They changed into an opaque substance, into hard horn. So the soft nails of baby foot, they grow harder and they change into the form of opaque substance. They become as hard as a horn, as hard as a horn. Coming to the next line. The child's little petals were crushed, lost their balance, took the form of reptile without eyes. The tiny petaled toes of the child get changed into an eyeless reptile with triangular heads like worms. So Neruda effectively uses the imagery of eyeless reptiles to describe the state of the foot, that is, it is conditioned by the society and it is controlled by the same. Here, eyeless reptiles suggest the transformation of the foot under the harsh realities of life. Coming to the next line. And they had calloused over. They were covered with the faint volcanoes of death, a coarsening hard to accept. Later, as the young foot grows older, they grow calloused. It means they become rough and are covered with scars of injuries which occurred during the man's struggle to survive in the world. So, calloused means hardened or thickened part of a skin. But this change is hard to accept. because it's covered with the volcanoes of death, which means facing dangers and taking risks in life. The change of getting hardened or roughened is hard to accept because it is covered with volcanoes of death, which means it is covered with the fear of facing dangers and taking risks in life. Even though the innocent foot dreamt of being a butterfly or an apple, it fails to accomplish the same because dream is a dream and reality is a reality. But this blind thing kept going without surrender, without stopping, hour after hour, one after another. Now as a man or a woman, above, below, through the fields, the mines, the stores, the government bureaus, backward, outside, inside, forward. This foot walked with its shoes. It hardly had time to be naked in love or in sleep. One foot walked, both feet walked until the whole man stopped. Even though the foot is old, it blindly, without rest and sleep, continues to walk. The poet depicts how humans live mechanical, machine-like life without second thought, without thinking twice. The foot continues to walk up and down through the fields, mines, markets, ministries. Whether it's a man's foot or a woman's foot, the foot has no time to stop and to enjoy the life. It has no time for love or sleep until when man decides to stop. That is, the man is dead. The presence of food in every order of life is described in the lines, one after another, now as a man or a woman, above, below, through the fields, the mines, the stores, the government bureaus, backward, outside, inside, forward. Usually, backward and forward are paired together, but here the poet pens outside and inside between backward and forward. This word structure suggests that journey of foot has no purpose. The foot does not know where it is going, why it is toiling. It works and works 24/7 without any aspiration. So it's a senseless, dreamless, monotonous journey. The foot has had such a life without any respite or short period of rest. It's a lone and arduous or difficult course for the foot until the man chooses to stop. Okay, to apply the poem to day-to-day life, this is how we are living in this global competitive world. When we were children, we had big dreams. Now, life has turned to be mechanical. We are foot prisoned in a shoe. We boast that we are living in the competitive world, but we do not know with whom we are competing. We wake up in the morning, take bath, have breakfast, get our lunchbox ready, leave home for our 10 to 12 hour IT job. There we toil even though we know we may get fired at any time. Then we head back home at late night, eat what is available in fridge without bothering about taste and browse social media for some time. Then we go to bed. The same routine continues each day. So we are foot condemned to live in a shoe. Now, last stanza of the poem. And then it went down into the earth and it did not know anything because there everything was dark. It did not know it was no longer a foot, or if they buried it so it could fly, so it could be an apple. This means when it meets its end, it does not know that it has just ceased to be a foot, but the hope remains. Neruda concludes on an optimistic note that even when the foot is buried, it hopes to become a butterfly or an apple. To conclude, people do a lot of things which is nothing but imitating one another and trying to become like others. In other words, people live for others with no purpose in life. They waste their lives without living as lively, meaningfully, and happily as a butterfly or an apple. The monotonous journey of life is described in the poem, and lastly, the tragic death as the person passes away without achieving